This is a podcast from Rover.
Welcome to Parents We've Met, where we chat about the magic and mess of parenting. Now, you probably haven't heard of today's guest, but this chat is filled with gold. Dr Melanie Woodfield has been a clinical psychologist for the last 20 years. She also features on our online course, Untangling Anxiety. And I have to say, I think she has one of the most soothing and calm voices I've ever heard. Like when you listen to her, you think, maybe everything will be okay. Hey Melanie, so wonderful to have you on the couch today with us. Thank you for saying yes. I always get excited when people say, yes, I'll come, I'll chat. Being a parenting podcast, we would love to know about your whānau. Can you tell us a little bit about the makeup of your family?
Sure. So my husband and I have got two boys. One is 15 and the other's 13, and we've got a little grey tabby cat called George.
I love the saying that it takes a village to raise a child. I think there's a lot of truth in that. What does your bigger village look like?
I think it's changed quite a lot over time, and I've tried to be quite intentional about the village. In the early days, we had some sort of gnarly seasons where the kids had some quite serious health issues, which have thankfully kind of stabilised. But I remember being quite intentional about who it felt useful to have in my kind of village in that season. I had some beautiful friends with the best of intentions who were advice givers, and, you know, they'd text me and say, I was up late last night and I found this book or this website and it's exactly what you need. And I would get that text and I would think that is not exactly what I need. And so I learned to kind of prune the village a little bit to have my kind of closest people kind of being what I needed in that season. And it's changed over time. I think like a lot of families these days, when the kids were small, various grandparents were still working full-time. So in terms of childcare, it was a bit of a juggle, but we are super lucky to have had a fantastic nanny in our life, and she's been with our family. She's a part of the family for 14 years now, so
wow.
Such a treasure.
Wonderful.
Mel, can you tell us a little bit about what got you into the career that you're in right now?
So when I was a teenager, I wanted to be a doctor, as a lot of people do, and so I studied Latin for 4 years because I thought that would help me get into med school. The only thing it's helped me with is my 13-year-old's homework, but it is I feel quite smug when he asks me a question. I'm like, I know that from 25 years ago. I remember that. So I did 4 years of Latin, and instead of working in a supermarket as a teenager, I thought I should volunteer in a private psychiatric hospital as my part-time job, and they were very gracious and said, hey, you're volunteering but you're doing lots of stuff, so let's pay you for it. So I ended up working for 4 years every Saturday and Sunday in a psychiatric hospital as a teenager. And looking back, it was hugely kind of formative. I had done lots of science and maths in high school and enrolled in a science degree at uni, did the first year, which is lots of chemistry, biophysics, and someone said to me that psychology was easy marks. So I thought, right, sign me up. I'm there, give me some easy marks. And I still remember stage 1 psychology, just sitting there and thinking, this is so interesting. And I didn't even apply for med school at the end of the first year. I went on and finished a science degree majoring in psychology, applied for teaching and clin psych at the same time, got into both, was totally about to take teaching up and got a call, which again is one of those moments I'll never forget in life. Got the call that I got into the clinical psych program. I had a fantastic summer job watering plants. I was one of the people that go around the office buildings with a watering can and cargo pants with scissors and, you know, chopping leaves and making everything look fab. Did you have that job?
Well, I've still got it.
Jenny is the one at our office that is like getting all the leaves polished and there is an art to it.
It's a thing. And
trimming.
my Latin came in handy because the good old spathiphyllum, the peace lily.
Yes.
Back then there were a lot of pubs and clubs and a lot of our plants were in pubs, and I would have to wipe the nicotine residue off the spathiphyllum leaves. That was a big part of my job.
I don't have to do that.
No. Yeah, you do you, Jenny.
Yeah, I'll do me.
But no, I remember I was in the back of the plant van sweeping it out, as you do. Got the phone call on the Nokia, which could just do basic text and calls. And it was so funny because I got off at the post and I realised halfway through the conversation that they must have got the wrong person. And so I kind of tried to politely interrupt, so I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I think you might have the wrong Melanie. And I spelled my surname. To my embarrassment now, I actually spelled my surname to make sure that they had the right person. I was so convinced they had the wrong person. But yeah, so I've been a clinical psychologist for the last 20 years and I absolutely love it.
How does your career impact your parenting? Because I can imagine you have got so many tools over the years that would be helping your family, but you also would be exposed to a lot of really hard stuff.
Yeah, I think one of the things I always say to families I work with, because most of my work these days is not so much with teenagers, it's with parents of teenagers, parents of small children. I always say, look, even though I teach this for a living, I'm not a perfect parent. And I don't think people believe me. They see an hour a week where I'm in my work clothes, got my, as a psychologist, there's a uniform. You must have dangly earrings, long skirts and sandals. I'm joking. But, you've got your work clothes on. You've sort of pulled yourself together for work, and the families I'm journeying with often only see that part. But something that's really occurred to me over the years is having knowledge about parenting is one thing, but drawing on that knowledge in the moment is actually incredibly hard. I sometimes say to a parent, if I sat you down in a quiet room with relaxing music and snacks. I mean, we've got some top-level snacks today, but if we had homemade Afghans and ginger crunch and lollies and you were in a super calm, relaxed, quiet environment and I gave you an exam on what to do in a certain situation with a child, you would ace that thing. You'd be 100%, and the parent often said, well, yeah, I probably would, because most of us would. But actually what happens in reality is a situation occurs in the home that has so many layers to it. It has the layers of where we're at as a parent, where our child is at, where their sibling is at, where the dog or the cat is at. So many interrelated things going on that actually can get in the way of our ability to draw on that knowledge, that head knowledge that we have. So just as an example, as humans, we have powerful emotions and thoughts associated with those feelings. So if I'm parenting in the midst of my kitchen and I sort of feeling all right, the day's going okay, and then a situation happens with the kids, maybe I might hypothetically have a thought like, he always does this, or I wish he was more like his brother, and I'm just tossing out ideas. These don't relate to my kids. They're awesome. But, all sorts of thoughts like other people's kids don't do this. It's not fair that my life is so hard with you guys. You can imagine all sorts of thoughts that a parent might have about their kids. They might also have thoughts about themselves as a parent. I'm ruining them. If they had a good mum, she would ... I'm terrible at this. I can never get it right. And these are what we call parent-referent attributions or child-referent attributions. That's just a fancy way of saying thoughts and ideas about what causes behaviour that relate to the child or the parent or both. And so I always kind of explain that to parents, that knowledge is one thing, but using the knowledge in the moment is often kind of tripped up by a whole lot of emotions and thoughts that come up.
Thinking about your work, Mel, what are some of the big concerns or the big anxieties that you see presented as parents come to see you?
One of the big things at the moment that seems to be coming through is just the barrage of information about parenting and figuring out what to trust and who to listen to with these really prominent voices online. It wasn't this simple, but I kind of think back, previous generations may have had one or two really authoritative sources of guidance for parenting, Dr. Spock or whoever. Murphy's Law had always ended up being sort of a white male paediatrician from the States or something like, really prominent authors, and the dog-eared, well-worn book might be passed across the back fence along with a kind of Lamington recipe or something. I'm being silly, but, there were kind of a few powerful ideas that influenced parenting, including from multi-generational. You might have your grandmother's advice or your parents' advice, and as I say, I think things have changed with a lot more grandparents still in the workforce. These days, whether you like it or not, if you are relaxing and scrolling through social media, whether you like it or not, boom, there's this barrage of Brandy from the States who's only going to charge you $500 to listen to her reckons. And I don't mean any offence to Brandy, but, it's quite hard to discern if these products and services look really slick and they look really authoritative. How do you figure out if one approach is advocating this, the other's advocating that? How do you figure out the middle ground? And I think one of the applied places where that lands is with the technique of time out, which I'd be happy to talk about that controversy. So Dan Siegel is a really prominent author in the attachment field, and he and Tina Payne Bryson wrote this fabulous book called The Whole Brain Child. They've written several books. And in the publicity for that book, Time magazine wrote an article about the book to sort of promote things. And the headline, which they didn't choose, was "Timeouts are hurting your child." And still to this day, if you Google timeout, that's one of the top things that sort of pops up. And in the article, a couple of really select pieces of research were quoted. It wasn't the full picture. And there was a huge controversy at the time. So the American Academy of Pediatrics and a whole lot of other really big groups in the States came out and said, hang on a minute, we've got a lot of research that says that timeout is safe and effective when it's used in a certain way. And the authors actually came back and said, we agree with that. Like, we totally agree. Even though we are attachment-oriented people, we agree that when you use timeout occasionally as part of a well-thought-out parenting program, and if everybody's calm, if parents are calm when they're implementing it, if it's short and age-appropriate and the child knows ahead of time what's going to happen, not only is it safe, but it's actually really effective. So even, these prominent attachment authors agreed that this is okay, and yet that piece that they wrote, it is really hard to find that online because it represents the middle ground, and that's not clickbait.
Right.
It's the middle ground. It's still there online, but it's actually quite hard to find their statement that came out.
Yeah. One of the things I notice when parents access a parent coach is that because they have read so much and got so many ideas, and a lot of them sound good, and so they try them, but it's almost like they're looking around the corner for what else have I missed or what else could there be. So it creates a sort of instability of, I'm going to flip-flop. I will just do a little bit of this and then I might change it quickly because it's no longer working. And so it almost feels like children must be subject to this changeable parenting style that they're bringing as they scroll and search and find something new to change what they're doing. So I guess it erodes that sense of your own confidence.
Totally agree. Yeah, it's that sense of, I'll try this strategy for a bit because this author recommends it. Oh, I gave that. It doesn't seem to work. Whereas we know that actually trying a strategy once or twice, it's unlikely to be effective. You've got to stick at it for a wee while to see if it genuinely is going to be effective. But it's that chopping and changing, like you say. People think, I thought we were supposed to do time in. Oh, hang on, are we supposed to do time out? I would suggest you need both. You should be doing time in most of the day, every day. Do you know what I mean? Like, the effectiveness of using brief timeouts actually hinges on whether you're doing a heck of a lot of time in. And if you're not, timeouts are not going to be as effective or as safe relationally. So it's not either or in many cases. It's actually both. Do both.
We'll have a lot of parents listening that have got little ones and some that have got teenagers or even grandparents, a whole range of listeners, which I love. For someone listening that's never heard of time in, can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so it's defined a few different ways by different people, but it's pretty much drawing close to your child in the moment. So if a child is having a really big feeling, if they're feeling incredibly disappointed or frustrated or angry, we don't want to be using time out in that moment. That's a moment to sit nearby if they'll tolerate that and to just name, reflect the emotion. I think you might be feeling pretty angry with your brother right now. I'm not angry. You're not feeling angry. There's something else. He's just so annoying. He's really annoying. So you can just kind of validate. You feel like he's really annoying. And you're not validating the behaviour necessarily. You're very much validating the emotion. So you can feel angry at your brother and you must use your gentle hands. So time in essentially is just drawing close, usually in the presence of a big emotion, and naming and validating and reflecting that emotion, giving permission for that emotion, and then moving apart again.
Love it. I've heard you say a few times that we don't need to aim for perfection. We just need to be good enough parents. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, I don't think there is, like you were saying, Jenny, I don't actually think there is one right way to do parenting, but we accidentally get the message that there is and that we're somehow doing it wrong. And I think, I hate to say it, but Brandy with her reckons, she's made a career out of people feeling anxious that they're somehow getting it wrong and they need to buy her product or her service. I feel awful that I'm kind of slandering Brandy for Brandy, but hopefully you know what I mean. That, of course there are things that we should objectively not do that are not safe when we're parenting. But I would suggest that's in the minority. Most of the stuff that we do is okay, and we kind of get there on our own journey. Just a practical example from when my kids were tiny, I didn't enrol them in a whole lot of blimmin' baby ballet or baby clarinet lessons, or they didn't even go to swimming lessons until they were about 4. I mean, that is shocking these days. That is, talk about bad parent. No, I'm joking.
I've got a 4-year-old that's not gone to any swimming lessons. So I'm like,
go you.
But she's so stubborn that she's taught herself to swim. So that's why she's just like, no, I don't want to go, but I will learn myself.
That's it. But I just remember thinking, sure, we could do those things. Maybe some people would argue you should do baby ballet and baby clarinet lessons, but I used to get, so when the kids were tiny and I was off with them much of the week, I would sometimes get to kind of 11 o'clock, and for me the stretch between 11 and 3 was the dead zone, where it was, oh my goodness, how do we fill this time? Once we got to 3, it felt like things picked up and there was momentum in the rhythm of the day. But I had so many days where we went out to Huia. I don't know if you know Huia. Yeah. And we could have gone to baby ballet, but I thought, no, how will we get through this day with me feeling okay, with them feeling okay, and us all feeling kind of calm and centred? And I'm someone that needs a bit of time away, a bit of time alone. Huia is the most beautiful space. It happens to have a fabulous cafe, great coffee, and I would, literally 2 or 3 times a week, we would drive out there. I'd get a caramel slice and a cappuccino. And there's a beautiful playground that is not the fanciest, there are other fancier playgrounds. It would almost always be deserted, which was perfect. I would put a blanket down, sit with my caramel slice and cappuccino. The kids would go for gold. Nobody there, so I didn't have to intervene constantly and, don't touch him and don't. They just did their thing. I had my drink. We were all stoked. We'd put on some cool music, going back. I'm a big fan of the BFM Kids Show. Don't know if people know it. It's got awesome old school radio plays. So we'd listen to these radio plays, Sparky and the Magic Piano and stuff, driving out there, driving back. It was a happy time. And I guess I'm just making the point that, anxiety might tell a parent that if they don't take their child to that class, their child will have fewer opportunities, their child is missing out. I would suggest if parents and kids are in a good, balanced space, that's going to be good for everyone.
Love it. Parenting Place, with the help of yourself and others, have put out an anxiety course. Who do you think this is going to be useful for?
It was such an honour, honestly, to be part of that, and such a privilege. And you guys feature in that course, and it's such a treat to be kind of included in the team for that. And I have to say, when I was first asked to be a part of it, sometimes I say yes to things, sometimes I say no. I wasn't sure about this because I absolutely trust and believe in parenting plays. And as I got to know some of the key people behind it, Anna, one of the key people, she's won awards for documentaries. So I was thinking this bodes well, but I'm still not sure how this is going to turn out. And when I saw the finished product, I genuinely couldn't believe how professional it was and how helpfully it had been packaged together. I'd contributed my piece, others had contributed their piece, and these things were woven together in such a skillful way. So I think who it will be helpful for is, I think it's one of the only courses that is growing in Aotearoa. There are a lot of courses related to supporting parents of anxious kids that come from Australia or the States, and there's nothing, those are great, but we don't actually have any that are grounded and grown in Aotearoa. And there's beautiful whakatauki, there's beautiful kind of voices from our local context, which is so very powerful. And I think what the course does, it informs, it gives practical skills and strategies and ideas, and I think it reassures. Something else that it does that is a bit different from some of the other programs is in the course we talk about, when should I be really worried about my child? What is that kind of threshold of what's normal anxiety and what might be tipping into maybe a clinical level of anxiety? And then what the heck do we do if that's the case? And not a lot of courses kind of go there about where to from here, what do we do? So I think lots of gems in there.
Yeah, you really do see parents struggling with what's normal, when do I need help? And I think it's really lovely that we're landing them in a place that gives them some real guidance there. Something else that parents often struggle with that I've found in coaching is that they sometimes feel that their children are not showing great levels of remorse or empathy towards others, and it can feel like, is this ever going to happen? Is my child going to get there with showing some compassion for a friend or a sibling? What do you think can help that in parents' own mind and how they relate to their children?
A couple of things come to mind. So I think whatever the situation, it's useful to think development. Think, where is my child at developmentally? For example, a 2-year-old doesn't, in most cases, they haven't yet developed the ability to think about other people's thoughts and feelings. That's something we call theory of mind. So your average 2-year-old does not have the concept yet that even though they're delighted with the disgusting decapitated bird that the cat found, even though they're thinking, this is amazing, how fantastic, mum might not feel the same. So I think it's a big ask to expect a 2-year-old to genuinely demonstrate remorse because they don't yet have that developmental skill of understanding others' thoughts and feelings. And just to say that age is not the only factor that influences development. If a child is on the autism spectrum, for example, they might be older than 2, but still developing that skill of being able to think about others' thoughts and feelings. Another thing I'd say is sometimes kids are experiencing remorse, but they're not articulating it. So they might feel a bit bad about that thing, but they're not able to say, I'm really sorry about that in the moment. They might be able to say it in half an hour, but often in society we expect an immediate socially acceptable response. So if our child bops someone on the playground, which may or may not have happened to me, we expect, come on, say sorry. You need to go up to him and you need to say sorry. And your child is either like, no, I'm not doing that, or sorry. And as parents, we often say, you need to say it like you mean it. And we are stuck in a bit of a social quandary because it's kind of expected of us that we would prompt our child to say sorry in a meaningful way. And so as parents, we might feel a bit stressed. Oh, my goodness, what would the other parent think of me and think of my parenting and think of my child? There's this kind of confluence of stuff going on. So I think consider development, consider the fact they may actually be feeling remorse, they may not just be able to articulate it very well, and maybe think about your timing. You might get a genuine apology half an hour later.
Beautiful.
I giggle because that whole thing played out this morning at my home. Sorry. Exactly. I've heard you talk before about how every behaviour has a function. This sounds quite hopeful. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, so behaviour is communication. And as parents, if there's a behaviour that's really challenging for us to manage, we can start to think about what are the patterns here? When is this behaviour showing up? What's going on? And if people are super interested, you can actually search online. There are 4 functions of behaviour, or 4 categories that behaviour tends to fall into. For example, one of them is task avoidance. Just say, for example, if your child is not a fan of reading and, that afternoon after school there's some reading practice to be done, all of a sudden your child sort of tips over the water glass or whatever, you think, what is the function of tipping over the water glass? It's probably to get out of reading. And we can target our response based on what function we think that behaviour is serving. So another common function is seeking attention usually from a parent. Another common function is sensory related. So there might be situations where there's a particular noise or series of experiences that is kind of overwhelming for that human being, and they might act in a certain way to either get out of that situation or into that situation. And the final function that behaviour tends to serve is to get access to items. One of my kids, when they were tiny, said to me once, "I will cry and my teacher give me iPad." And I thought that was so super cute, because they didn't realise that if they told me that, I might intervene so that didn't happen. But it was just so clear-cut that the function of throwing a wee tantrum was to get access to a desired item. And just to further geek out, I love this stuff, but just to further go there, the same behaviour can serve several functions at the same time. And the function that a behaviour serves can change according to the day, the circumstance, the child. So we can't feel smug, unfortunately, that we've kind of figured it out, because it can shift and change.
There's a lovely piece, Welcome to Holland, and you shared this with me before. Can you tell us a little bit around that and how that applies to parenting?
Yeah, I just love this piece of prose. It was actually written by a woman who was a writer for Sesame Street, and she won lots of awards for that. She had a son with a disability. He had Down syndrome, and I think it's a lovely validating piece for parents of a child with a disability, but also for parents where the parenting journey hasn't kind of turned out how they thought it would. And I see that a lot. I think it's a common situation that before you become a parent, you have powerful ideas about what it's going to be like. And when kids come along, it's not always what you thought it would be. And that can lead parents to be in a bit of a space of a sense of injustice. Hang on, this is not what I thought it would be like. And injustice often sits underneath emotions like anger or frustration, because those are often secondary to some of these other emotions. And I think I've seen a few parents over the years get a wee bit stuck in that space of, it's not fair. This is really, really hard, and everyone else seems to have it better or easier than I do. And whether that's objectively true or not, it really leaves you in a space, if we think about the impact or the effect of having those thoughts, it leaves you in a really low place. And kids can often struggle to make sense of why a parent might be suddenly kind of furious when actually what's running through their mind could be a sense of, this is really hard and I didn't think it would be this hard. So Welcome to Holland, just as a paraphrase, is essentially this metaphor of an idea that you're on an aeroplane and you're heading towards Italy, and you've had the guidebooks back when we had guidebooks. Probably you've scrolled, the internet, and you've prepared and you've practiced the language, and everybody else is going to Italy, and you can't wait to get the gelato and the pizza and visit, the Colosseum, and you're all about Italy. This is going to be amazing. You can't wait. And the plane arrives and you get off and you're greeted with, "Welcome to Holland." And you're kind of like, hang on, what? Like, Holland? I thought we were going to Italy. Everybody else has gone to Italy, and I've arrived in Holland. I want to go to Italy. Like, come on. And the notion of this piece of prose is Holland has windmills. Holland has cheese. Holland has tulips. Holland has a beautiful language of its own. Holland has a whole lot of stuff that is different from Italy, but it's not worse than Italy. It's just really different. And it can take a wee while to learn the language of Holland when you've been practicing Italian, to learn some kind of Dutch when you've got Italian, when you've got the guidebooks for Italy and you thought you were going to Italy. But actually Holland is not lesser than, it's just different too.
I love it. It's a beautiful, beautiful thought.
I do. One of the other things I wanted to ask, Mel, is in your experience, what are some of the overlooked trends or influences in society that could be negatively affecting children's well-being?
Can I be a bit provocative with this?
Yes.
Go for it.
I think kids don't need to be happy all the time. Like, there'll be parents hearing that thinking, what? But I think sometimes parents get really stuck because they think that the measure of parenting success is that your child is happy. And I would suggest that allowing a bit of frustration, allowing low levels of stress, I think stress and distress can be a bit different. But allowing low levels of disappointment and stress and frustration and unhappiness, I think promotes healthy development for kids. And so I think that's something I've seen a wee bit of, is that we tend to prioritise children's happiness over all else.
Where do you think that's come from?
I think a whole lot of stuff, but I do wonder so lots of parents these days are in families where both parents are busy and working, and the blooming cost of living crisis, people are having to do a lot to get by these days. And when you get home at night and both parents are exhausted and kids have been in long hours of daycare, I think the idea of holding to a limit and potentially having your child be upset or unhappy or frustrated or have a wee tantrum, I think everybody's like, oh, let's just make it easier. Like, let's just go with what makes them happy. I really get that. And I think we need to, at times, hold to that limit. Different programs have different ways of describing it, but you'll know, Jenny, the Circle of Security program has a beautiful way of saying, as parents, we need to be bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind. Bigger, stronger doesn't mean mean or threatening or domineering. And wiser and kind doesn't mean a pushover and permissive, but we need to be both. So allowing a child's lead where we can and taking charge where necessary.
Beautiful. There are certain routines that are really important to build connection with our kids, routines or things that we do with them. What are some of those things that bring us closer to our kids?
I think this is going to be informed by people's cultural values, family values, your own personal values, the social groups that you're in. Something I might suggest that promotes connection with my kids might be actually really different if you're part of a multi-generational family and you're sharing a home. So I think meal times are often a key thing, but again, that may not be possible if someone else is giving your kids dinner and you're getting home late. The last thing I want is for parents to feel guilty or bad that they can't be there at dinner time. So that's why I think that kind of thing is quite personal, but I would encourage parents to think about the rhythm of the day, think about opportunities for connection throughout the day. What's practical for you? What's going to work in your family routine? Something practical I used to ask myself constantly when the kids were small, and especially even now they're teenagers, I think to myself, have I made eye contact with my kids in the last hour or two? It's like boom, 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 go, go, go. Have I actually stopped and looked into their eyes and just checked in? I think sometimes little things like that, if you can't do the meal times and stuff.
With every guest on the couch, we talk about the messy and the magic that go hand in hand in parenting. Where do you find the magic in your parenting?
I love picking up from school. No matter how busy life is, I try to do that 3 days a week. That's my minimum. Because even with teenagers, I think that's where you get the fresh download of what's happened. When I get home a bit later, that freshness is often gone. And so I find the magic in those kind of after school pick up, that sort of stuff. And bedtime is when the kids often want to just chat. Murphy's Law, it's always when, you're quite keen to head on downstairs and catch up on Netflix. But I just tell myself these days, I can absolutely imagine a time in the not too distant future where I'm going to be asking them, please come and see your mum, And so I'm like, actually just stop, woman, stop and listen and get into this. We have a lot of humour in my family. I often gently mock my teenagers. We'll be walking, for example, they hate walking, but I'm doing a walking challenge, so they come and they grizzle for the first few minutes and then they're absolutely fine. But I usually say to them when we're walking, this would be a great time, guys, if you want to have a deep and meaningful, like now works. Who's ready? Who wants a D&M? And they're like, Mum. And I'm like, okay, cool. And likewise, when I'll ask them a kind of reflective question, like, when he did that, how was that for you? Mum's talking a psychologist. I'm like, well, that was a massively meaningful parenting moment. Thank you. Like, so good. But we just have this kind of gentle mocking, and I think they really enjoy that kind of, that it's not too laden or serious. It's actually just fun. And if they feel like talking, cool. If they don't, there'll be another time.
I think in parenting, you're saying, like, we're always trying to get information and we listen to talks and we read things. Is there anything that you've come across that's been quite special in your parenting that you've read or heard?
It's such a cliche, but the days are long and the years are short. Those early days, they stretched forever. And now I'm like, did another year just go? Like, wow. And I think it's, again, I hesitate with the cliches because when families are in the midst of those early days and they're so long and they're relentless and they're very physical, lots of cleaning up mess and muck, I hesitate to say trite things like cherish the moment. I mean, blimey, it's a hallmark card, isn't it? But you do look back and you think, wowzers, that was actually, as hard as that was actually a really special time. And yeah, that's something that's kind of, I'm in a space of going, wow, like that's gone. Come on, grandchildren, where are you? Not yet, but when the time's right.
Cherish the moment now.
Yeah.
Now, I love the anxiety course, and I love just sitting with so many gems from you. So if people are wanting more Dr. Melanie, they can go and do the course. But with people that are listening right now, we're all trying to do our best on this parenting journey. We're all trying to give it a go and help our kids to have less to work through and more to work with. So what would you like to finish off today with? Any words of advice, anything to leave our listeners with?
Keep on keeping on. Just as an antidote to the hallmark from earlier, it's hard, and each day is a tick. Each day is you did it. And the other thing I would say is don't be afraid to be real and human with your kids. I've definitely had moments where I've said stuff or handled a situation in a way that I thought afterwards, and I actually, depending on the age of my kids, I have actually said that to them, Looking back, I probably didn't manage that one super well. What I wanted to say was ... Or, I'm really sorry that I said it in that way. The words that I said, I meant that. We really do need to follow that up. And I should have said it with a calmer tone of voice, and I'm sorry about that. So I think it's mucky, it's messy. We all make mistakes, including those of us that teach this for a living. I am genuinely not a perfect parent. I don't think there is such thing. Even Brandy is not a perfect parent. And just every day, just keep on keeping on, and you're doing a great job.
Love it. It was so wonderful having Dr. Melanie Woodfield on the couch today after watching her on the anxiety course and all the gems that she got to share. So this was a real highlight for me. What to you really stuck out, Jenny?
It was a great chat with Dr. Melanie. I really loved when she talked about, she didn't say slowing it down, but kind of not buying into the rather forceful trend that I feel parents have found themselves in, where it feels like you need to subcontract to a whole lot of other things to be a good parent. So it starts so early. I think that's where I get cross, is that how early parents feel like I need to enroll my child in these baby activities or into classes for ballet. They need some additional things that cost quite a lot of money. And I feel like it takes a little bit of the confidence away from a parent, feeling like, actually, I could probably just go to the pools and splash around and my child is getting some amazing water confidence. Or I could roll down some hills and climb a tree, just to do something that's completely free and the resources are out there, and I haven't had to sit and watch or cross the city to get there or work extra hard to pay for it. And I just love that notion that we can make it easier on parents and build their confidence that they are kind of the first and most important teacher their child will ever have.
Yeah, I think as parents too, we want to give our kids opportunities, and especially, you know, growing up, if you didn't have a lot. I did piano lessons. I think I had 5 piano lessons, and then we couldn't afford it as a family. So, you know, I need to look at myself and go, oh, you know, I want to give my children all the things that I couldn't do. But do they need it? And I suppose it's that sort of checklist of, is this worth doing right now? Can we afford it? What is my capacity? Is it stretching me? Is it taking away from family life?
Yeah, it's
so
looking
good.
at the whole picture rather than, just one thing. And sometimes the stress on the family isn't worth it. And I also think that just looking down the life of your child, there are years to come where these activities are amazing. Let me just say that. I think that ballet and dance and guitar lessons and piano lessons and all those things are amazing that we can buy into, but we don't have to do it all at once and we don't have to do it too early. We can take ourselves off the hook a bit and say, I am being a good parent. I'm actually going to take my kids to the park and watch them.
Yeah, you gave me some great advice in one of our sessions before my boy started school, and you said, just give him a term. Don't do anything else. Just allow him to get used to a new teacher and friends, you know, learning this routine. Just do that for a term. And I'm so glad we did, because it was a lot for him to get his head around and to get used to, and it took the pressure off us for sure. I love too, and she sort of started it as being evocative, you know, but this idea of that we don't need to keep our kids happy all the time, which I think is such a good reminder, because there's so many different emotions and we want our children to be able to feel them, to walk through them all with us by their side. And happiness is wonderful, but I mean, I remember disappointment was a huge one for me. As an adult, I realized I hadn't really grappled enough with that, and I didn't want to feel disappointed, and I didn't want to disappoint others.
It is a big one, and what parent doesn't want their kids to be happy? Of course we do, but if it's the only or the most important goal we have, our children are going to have a range of feelings. And I share with parents, I think that every day your child is going to feel disappointed on some level. And so we want to prepare them for that and be with them in their disappointment, whether it's over the ice block flavours or that you're not taking them down to the mall or whatever. There is such a need for us to quickly solve a problem as well. And so we are settling ourselves to let some disappointments or some other feelings be there for our kids. And that's where resilience comes from. Resilience doesn't come from always getting everything the way you want it to be. And it's a little reminder for us all to just step back a bit from the happiness ideal and think, I want my child to be happy and flexible and patient and self-controlled, and to be able to handle all of the other feelings that will come their way.
We're going to add some links on our show notes. So if you'd like to delve into some of the things that we've talked about, you can go and have a look there. We'll also add a link to our Untangling Anxiety course, which Dr Melanie Woodfield is part of too. So head along to parentingplace.nz. Parents We've Met is brought to you by Parenting Place, a charity that is all about supporting whānau across Aotearoa. helping parents feel really confident in their parenting so that children can feel deeply loved. To find out more, head along to parentingplace.nz.
Rover. Music, radio, podcasts.